Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatia, for setting me up, and good morning to all of you. It's always a pleasure to speak in this forum, and congratulations. I didn't realize time flies so fast that this is the 22nd edition of the World HR Congress. I was speaking at the SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resource Management, in Chicago last year, and as some of you would know, that's 3,500 delegates, and I've never seen such a large crowd in my life. And somebody asked me in that session saying that, look, where do you enjoy speaking the most? And I'm not lying here. I said it is the World HRD Forum, not because of the size, of the intellect of the audience, but because it's such a great community. And I think you will agree that it's people like Mr. Arun Arora and Dr. Bhatia who have kind of built this community over a period of time. Because all of us can come together for conferences and speak and have cups of coffee and shake hands. But at the end of the day, it's the continuity, it's the relationships, and not just the Facebook likes and dislikes that we build that really makes this HR community happen. So congratulations again, I think it's fantastic. I also want to I will not speak, so to disprove your point. So I'm just going to tell you a couple of stories because I think we have a very interesting panel and I don't want to take all the time. But I do want to say a couple of stories about this industry that I come from. In fact, I am as old in the IT industry as your World HRD Forum. I came to the IT industry in the 90s, and I've completely fallen in love with this sector because it has so much challenge. Every year when we hold our industry conference, we discover that everything we have done in the last 20 years is useless, and the next year is going to define the future of this industry. So you'll never get an industry like this. And interestingly, I still remember in the early days of our industry, in the 90s, 2 or 3 of us who were very passionate about what information technology can do for India, for Indian people, and indeed for the world, we used to go around the world doing evangelical seminars on what India can do. Because as some of you will recall, in the 70s and 80s, the perception of India was, you know, the snake dancers and the rope dancers, etc. I mean, it was a very poor opinion of India. Sometimes I worry that this opinion is coming back with all our shenanigans in the political world. But nevertheless, we had to actually change the impression of what India was. And I still remember speaking in conferences like this, people would say, but look, I mean, we've heard of India, it's somewhere out in the east, and we've heard of, you know, good stuff happening there and Banaras and what have you. But what is the real value of the Indian professional? And my friend Devang Mehta, who was a very young man who had taken over as the president of our industry association, and I used to go around talking about this. And finally we said, look, let's not make speeches. Let's not talk about the IITs and the intellect and the people and the willingness to learn and everything else. Let's tell them a story. And now let me tell you one story we used to say all over the world. And this is a story of a global multinational which decides that it needs a chartered accountant or a CPA, an accountant or a finance head. So they obviously advertise in Time magazine and The Economist and what have you, and they get 2,000 applications from around the world. And finally they shortlist down to, and I'm not, don't get me wrong, this is just a story, so don't take anything personally. They shortlisted down to 1 French person, 1 American, and 1 Indian from Dr. Bhatia's organization, Fun and Joy at Work. And they call these guys for an interview. And they assemble this massive jury of 12 people, the best HR and finance professionals in their company. And they call the first candidate in. And he's obviously come for the chief financial officer's job. And they said, can we ask you a question? So he says, sure. He's from France. And they ask him the question saying, can you tell us what is 2 plus 2? And the Frenchman gets very upset. He says, I'm coming for a global financial controller's job and you ask me this insulting question. I'm going away. So he walks out. I said, okay. So next comes the American. I mean, he's from IBM, like my friend Himanshu. And he comes in there and they ask him the same question, saying that, look, can you tell us what is 2 plus 2? He says, I think I know the answer, but will you give me a minute? So he flips out his laptop and then there's the latest IBM ThinkPad, and then he kind of takes out his Excel spreadsheets, puts 2 in one cell, 2 in the other cell, puts the formula, and he says, it's 4. So they say, yes, of course it's the right answer, but can you wait because we have this young gentleman from Mumbai whom we also have to talk to. So here he comes, and this is Dr. Raju Bhatia 22 years ago. So he walks in and they ask him, Raju, yes. So he says, can you tell us what is 2 plus 2? And Raju comes very close to the jury, looks into their eyes and says, what do you want it to be? Okay. And if you look at conferences like this, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at our industry, the way it's evolved from a handful of us floating around talking about IT to today 3.3 million people and growing, it's because of not giving pat solutions for anything. Be very, very context specific, ask the questions, make sure there is involvement and make things happen. And to my mind, if I were to summarize what I think is a challenge of HR going forward, and I think Uma mentioned some of those, it is not to come up with those pat processes and processes and say this is how we do it, etc., etc., but really contextualize everything.